We always go to Tio Korea's. I love it after.
What is it?
Tio Korea's, the Mexican place.
Really?
That's
There's so many places there, you can't get to them all. Okay, boss.
In New Smyrna, have you tried
Sorry?
cookies?
Yes.
One more minute.
Well, one more minute.
I'm not trusting you. You just lied to me.
IRS doesn't either.
John, it's 8:30 now.
Okay. Call the order the Planning and Zoning Board meeting of February 22nd, 2021. Minutes. The minutes of the prior meeting of November 9th, 2020. Which turns out Rick was right, it was a long time ago. Everybody read the minutes, and anybody want to make a motion to approve?
I make a motion to approve.
I'll second it.
Sherry, would you take roll? Oh, I forgot to ask Sherry for the roll call also.
Well,
I
this
always
time
forget
you
that.
can do all in favor. Say aye.
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 Any opposed? That-
Sherry, would you take the roll call? Because I forgot.
Yes.
I just found this.
Okay. Chairman Schmitz?
Yes.
Mr. Lilly? Here. Ms. Tornatore?
Yes.
Mr. Horian?
Here?
Mr. Delange?
Here.
Mr. Rembrozewski, who is an alternate, is absent, and Mr. Needham, also an alternate, is absent.
Ooh.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
This item is a quasi judicial hearing for a zoning variance. Before we have staff come up, we're supposed to discuss if there was any conflict by any of the board members on this issue. And I understand that even driving by the property, looking at it qualified for that, so I have to say that I did drive by the property looking for
It
it.
just needs to be disclosed. It doesn't create a conflict. It just needs to be disclosed at
Okay,
the outset.
well, I did drive by the property,
I did drive by this park.
I did too.
okay? Stuart, would you like to present?
Good morning, Mr. Chair, board members. For the record, my name is Stuart Cres, City Planner with the City of Daytona Beach Shores. Today we have a zoning variance application 12021-002, and the subject property for this variance application is located at 3110 South Atlantic Avenue. The property owners are Mr. Robert Lee and Ms. Terry Lee. The applicant is Ms. Terry Lee and Edward Chip Miller of Miller Construction. The property is 0.12 acres, which is basically 5580 square feet. 5,580 square feet. The zoning for this property is RSF-2, which is Urban Single Family Residential Detached District, and the future land use for this property is low density residential. The variance request is a 5-foot setback in lieu of the required 10-foot side yard setback required on the south property line. And the variance application was submitted on the 19th of January this year. So there is one thing I want to just clarify, board members, with regards to the due public notice requirements. So the applicant has made all the due public notice requirements with the exception of the affidavit. Now, the applicant, Mr. Chip Miller, I know that he is who he say he is, and he has provided evidence that he has mailed out the required letters. He unfortunately just hasn't received any of the green return receipts, and that is sometimes common. And the property is posted as required by the city. So I am asking the board, the chair and the board, to go ahead and have this meeting proceed so long as the applicant goes ahead and fill out the affidavit accordingly. So essentially it needs to be notarized, and unfortunately it can't be notarized at this time because our notary in-house, our city clerk, does not have her stamp. So we're asking that the meeting continue as long as the affidavit is filled out immediately after the meeting. Do we need a consensus for that, Mr. Attorney?
Yeah, I mean, that's a decision the chair can make.
Okay.
Yeah. But there's no legal issue with doing that. We just, since Stuart knows the applicant personally, you know, even with notarization, there's an option for the clerk to say, this person's known me personally, as opposed to, you know, checking ID. So as long as you can verify that the applicant is who they say it is, then you can go ahead.
And it doesn't matter that none of the green cards of any of the neighbors come back?
No, I mean, it would come into play if we found out that he didn't do the mailings, you know, then we may have to do the hearing again, but, so, you know, you can't really hold up the hearing based on the U.S. Postal Service not sending back the green cards in time. And Stuart has represented that he did send out the mailings, so all the green cards are approved, but if Stuart is confident that that's happened, then we can move forward.
Okay, on Stuart's advice, we'll waive that until after the meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So in terms of this variance application review, the Community Services Director and Building Official, Mr. Hyatt, has also reviewed this application, and so have I. So just a quick location of where the site is. So you can see in the red circle at the top, that's the Community Center. That's where we are today at this moment, and just about a half a mile south of it is 3110 Brookfair Crescent, which is the subject location. So essentially, if you wanted to get there, and I know everyone has driven there, you head south on South Atlantic Avenue, you take a westbound on Van Avenue, and then you take a southbound on Brookfair Crescent, and it's on the west side of the road. So this is an aerial view of the property, and this is prior to the construction of the pool. And this picture, aerial photograph, is taken from the Volusia Property Appraiser, and the data set is from 2018. This is a street view of 3110 Brookfair Crescent, the site, and this was taken from Google Maps, and this photograph is from 2018. And you can see it's a beach-style construction that's prevalent during the 50s and 60s and even 70s. So this was submitted by the applicant. It's a black and white photograph, and this is the permitted pool, and as you can see, the pool has already been essentially built. This is a screen enclosure site plan, and the variance application, Mr. Chair, board members, is with regards to a screen enclosure. So the 5-foot side yard setback, I forgot to mention earlier, is in association with a screen enclosure. So what you can see is that the screen enclosure is proposed for the rear side of the property, and as you can see, it's a 30 by 30 proposed screen enclosure. This is a screen enclosure elevation plan of the property, and as you can see to the bottom where the red circle is, you can see that it's actually 11 feet, 8 inches, and 13/16 of an inch high, and so I've rounded up on the top to say 30 by 30 by approximately 11 by 9 inches. And what you'll notice is that to the bottom, you see this dashed line. It basically shows that the screen enclosure is more or less in line with the roof height. So the variance request, the red line that you see here where it says 1 story, this is the building footprint of the existing building. And as you can see, the existing setback from the side property line is 5.7 feet on the side yard setback here. And so this is essentially a non-conforming structure. And you can't see it very clearly here, but this is the outline of where the screen enclosure would go. This black line right here, and when you see the red line, that's the proposed enclosure setback of 5 feet. So essentially what the applicant wants to do is they want to essentially line up the screen enclosure with the south-facing wall of the existing building. So this is the zoning of the property. As you can see, it's in the RSF2 residential, single-family residential detached district, and it's RSF-2. And with regards to the relevant code references, the RSF-2 urban single-family residential detached district, you can see the side yard to the bottom is required 10 feet. If you look under section 14-34 of the city's land development code, which governs accessory uses and structures, you'll see that there is no exception for side yard setbacks for a property of this nature. Another section of the code applicable section of the code is section 14-43, which talks about exceptions to the required yard regulations. Again, if you look in this section of the code, you will not find any exceptions to side yard setbacks with regards to a property of this nature. And then this says 1443 to the top, but it's actually Article 6 of the city's land development code, which is an nonconformance provision. And if you peruse through this, you'll also find that there's no exceptions for side yard setbacks for accessory structures for non-conforming lots or non-conforming structures of this nature. So the variance authorization criteria, board members, you may recall, is in section 15-63.8 of the city's land development code, and it basically gives the 7 required criteria that the board has to consider in order to grant a variance application. And in your staff report, you'll see an attachment that essentially outlines and spells out the entire criteria. And what I've tried to do in this presentation, in this table, is to summarize the criteria, and I'll just go over them real quickly. And if you need to stop me for any of these, please do so, board members. So the first one is that special conditions or circumstances unique to the property exists. And staff was not able to find any that existed for this property. I did make a comment because in the applicant's application, there was a note about the property is non-conforming and was built in 1958. However, as I just mentioned previously, there's no exception in the code with regards to non-conforming properties that would constitute a special condition or circumstance. The second criteria is that special conditions or circumstances are not self-imposed or primarily economic or financial in nature. And staff actually feels that the application was essentially self-imposed. And the reason for that is because the pool permit application was made in August 30th of last year, and the screen enclosure application was submitted on November 12th of last year, whereas the plumbing, electrical, pool, and steel roofing inspections were conducted about a month before, which was October 19th, 2020. So essentially when the screen enclosure application was made, the hole was dug and roughing inspections were already done. So the third criteria is that the interpretation or enforcement would not deprive applicant of zoning entitlements. And again, I want to reiterate that Article 6 of the city's land development code does not provide an exemption for new structures being built adjacent to existing non-conforming structures, or essentially this property in question. However, all new construction that takes place in the city, regardless of zoning district, essentially has to meet the existing rules at the time of construction. So in this case, the accessory structure would have to meet section 14-17 and all the other sections of the code that I just mentioned, regardless of where the property was located and regardless of whether there was an existing non-conforming structure on the property. So the other 4 criteria, staff agrees that those criteria are met. You know, in terms of the minimum variance needed, as I mentioned earlier, the applicant wants to line up the screen enclosure with the existing face of the wall on that side of the property, and the staff does not believe that granting this variance will authorize or extend any other nonconformity, and staff believes that the variance is in harmony with the intent and purpose of the code. It will not be injurious to the area and will not authorize any unpermitted use. As I mentioned, you know, screen enclosure, you know, pools, you know, those are typical accessory structures that are associated with residential development. And we also believe that the variance, if approved, would be consistent with the comprehensive plan. So this is just a criteria summary that I typically put in my staff report to show how many criteria have been met and how many have not been met. And as you can see, in staff's opinion, 4 criteria have been met, whereas 3 have not. And I have a note down there that I typically put that pursuant to prior and current legal counsel, a successful variance application can only be achieved if all authorization criteria are met. And with that said, staff is obliged to provide a recommendation of denial. If there's any questions for staff, I'll be happy to take those. Yes, ma'am.
I have some questions, Stuart. I was there at that street, and it doesn't look like everyone on that street has a 10-foot variance or a 10-foot. So were they grandfathered in because they're so much older, and this person, it's newer, and so they have to go by the new rules?
So, Madam Board Member, so most of those properties in that area, you know, you can see the style of construction. You know, they're basically 1950s, 1960s construction. So the construction and the plat that are associated with those properties occurred prior to the establishment of the city's land development code, and specifically prior to this particular section of the code with regards to the side yard setbacks and accessory structures. The city's codes were adopted in the early 90s, whereas this property and the structures in the property were built in the 50s. The plat was actually done, I believe, in the early 1800s. I'm sorry, late 1800s. So the property itself and the structure, the existing structure on the property, they're what we call legal non-conforming. And the city attorney can always chime in as well. However, the code does not provide an exemption for non-conforming properties for new construction. So in other words, if you have a property that's non-conforming because it was built in 1800 whatever, you know, any new structure that's built has to meet the current and existing code of the day. And so that's all staff is saying. Staff is saying that, yes, we understand that the property is non-conforming. We understand that the lot was platted, you know, over 100 years ago. However, any new construction that happens has to meet the existing code. Yes, sir.
Stuart, reiterate why we have setbacks.
So we have setbacks for a multitude of different reasons. You know, one is safety, one is privacy, and another one is conformity with the prevailing neighborhood. So in the old days, you know, and this is a very extreme example. You know, so a person can put his outhouse or his cistern or whatever right next to his property's line, to his property neighbor's line, where it can create some sort of injurious or odorous or some type of discomforting type effect on his neighbor's property.
So it's basically setting distance between structures and for safety in case EMTs or somebody has to get back there and do something, right?
Yes, there's a multitude of different reasons.
Okay. Thank you.
Stuart, I noticed that the next door neighbor to the south had a screen also in the back. Is that screen in the back of that neighbor 5 feet or 10 feet from because the property that's next to that neighbor is open. And I was wondering because, when I drove by, it was a dead-end street and I had to get on the dirt road and go around, and I noticed the structure had a pool, and I was wondering if that indeed was in compliance with that setback.
So staff only did an analysis for this property itself, because this is the subject of the application. Were you referring to the property immediately north?
South.
Okay, south. Okay, so this aerial photograph doesn't really show the south very well, and I can't really see from there. But regardless, if there was, and I'm not even sure if that property to the south is immediately in the shores, because unfortunately in that vicinity, there are some properties that are in the shores and some properties that are in the county. But assuming it was in the shores and assuming that it was built within the 10-yard setback, that has nothing to do with this case.
Understood.
If I'm correct, Mr. Attorney, City Attorney.
That's correct.
The other question I had, was there any letters of support or letters of not supporting this from the immediate neighbors?
The city has not received anything on record,
Okay.
but I do understand that there might be a neighbor in the audience today that would like to speak about the application. Any more questions for staff?
Thank you, Stuart. Appreciate it.
No problem.
There might be, once I hear somebody. Thank you.
Okay, next would be if the applicant would like to speak on behalf.
Morning. As was said before, Blue Water Pools contracted with the Lees to build a pool. There was no discussion with the Lees and Blue Water as far as the screen enclosure. That was excuse me, an afterthought. The Lees had a screen enclosure on their property already. They were planning to use that enclosure as a sun barrier for the new pool. In the paperwork that I provided, Mrs. Lee has a condition that cannot, from her doctor, it's a letter from her doctor stating that she cannot be in the sun for very long, cancer situation. So then we just started discussing building a screen enclosure. Brock and I, who is the owner of Blue Water Pools, came up with this plan. The pool was on the corner of the house. Brock, Blue Water Pools, had no idea that he had to be 10 feet from the property line. So that's where he built the pool, because it was in line with the existing house. Myself, with Bill Screen, thought the same thing. When a house is to the property line, we feel that's as far as we could go. So that's why we submitted for our permit, and I got a nice little letter from the building department stating we needed a variance. So that's why we are here. Mainly, it's not a situation of wanting screen enclosure, but it's wanting the solid roof to give protection from the sun, as well as let the homeowners be able to enjoy the pool that was built. It is a hardship situation. because of her medical condition. They're very afraid also, since we're in this pandemic with COVID, keeping the bugs out, and all of that. So, any questions? Yes, sir.
So am I here? I just heard you say earlier that there was an existing screen enclosure.
Yes, sir.
It's basically the same as what you're proposing.
No, it wasn't even close. I hated to tell the lease, and I did. Your existing screen enclosure was right on the corner of the house. It was a 10 by 12 screen enclosure.
Oh, I see.
And they were hoping they, use that and build their pool from that. Would you like to see this?
No,
I think you have that.
I see it.
Anyway, what happened was the screen enclosures they had was junk. When we tore it down, when we tore it down, there was no scrap value in it. The extrusion was rusted, pitted, salt. The roof pans were it was junk. Mr. Lee and myself and his wife agreed. This thing, we're getting a new pool. We want a nice roof. I have to have shade. So that's the situation.
Thank you.
The city doesn't have to cover the entire pool.
No.
It could be safe. Right.
The enclosure that we will do, 10 feet from the house, the length of the pool is solid roof. And then from there out, there'll be 20 feet of screen. The homeowner, y'all discussed earlier, the homeowner to the south. They're in attendance. They're the people that will be affected by this if we go that way, because that is closest to their house. They have no objection.
Thank you. Stuart, I have a question. Was the pool non-conforming when it was built, and did it have to have a permit to?
The pool that I show you an exhibit of, that was recently built, the pool meets all the city's land development code. And there was a permit associated with it, or else code enforcement would have been all over it.
Yeah.
Seeing that they provided us evidence that it was built. Yes, and the city did conduct several inspections, and I think it's nearing final as well.
It is.
So the actual pool is 10 foot from the setback?
I believe
Not
it's-
counting the
I
deck?
believe it's 10 feet.
That's fine. We just have to change the structure above it.
All right.
Right.
Next is anybody that would like to speak for this variance?
Good morning.
Morning.
My name is Robin Ingham, for record. My wife Jackie. We are the property owners directly to the south, which I guess we would be the most affected by the structure that is proposed. Excuse me. I guess I've been watching the process of this all along, and there's a lot of stuff I understand, a lot of stuff I don't understand about it. The pool was put in, beautiful pool, nice, structure's good. It's within all guidelines, it's met the inspections. The old screen enclosure that was there covered was in line with the house. Never had an issue. The proposed enclosure, by looking at the drawings, are gonna be in line with the house again, following the line of the pool. giving them the lanai covered to help her with the sun, and then continuing on around the pool. It all makes the most sense to me. I'm a retired contractor. The lines will be good. There's really no sight blocking for us. Nothing that's going to affect us as far as visual. Probably most importantly, I look at it, you've got gates. Pools and backyards are legally have to have a fence all around them with a gate with a closure on it. And same as ours, we have the screen enclosure next door. Our neighbor to the south of us has a screen enclosure around their pool. But I look at, we've got new grandchildren coming. The gates that are on the fences around, if you look typically, I'm not sure exactly what the code is, but every gate I look at is about 4 feet off the ground. You go to any pool enclosure, screen enclosure, it's a regular 6-foot door coming in, whether it be 1 or 2. Typically, the latches are 5 foot high, double ensuring, and it's the safety factors of little kids getting in, whether an outside fence or gate be left open. Now you've got an exposed pool. I look at that as a big part of this whole picture. We really see nothing wrong with this. Again, it's going to be 5 feet from the line instead of 10. Doesn't matter. You can see through it as far as our regards go. There's plenty of room to go around it. We have the same situation on our side. Our existing enclosure, I measured over to our fence, we're maybe 6.5 feet. So I don't know what the guidelines were when that was put in. And I think that was only put in 12 years ago. Ours enclosure, pool. So basically, I guess what I'm saying is I would ask that it be approved for us, safety mostly, with the double gates and everything, the look that we're gonna have to look at, rather a chopped up little thing put on versus a nice proposed enclosure in line with the house, meeting the roof line. It, as a retired contractor, it makes the most sense to me. Most all and above the safety factor of, now we got 2 protections for our grandkids that are gonna be in the front yard. If they do happen to get in the gate, now there's another protection, another screen enclosure, a higher latch. So I guess I'm making a note of that safety factor. So any questions?
Seeing none, we will then ask if the applicant has any response.
Did you give an opportunity for those who oppose to
Oh,
speak?
no. Anyone in the audience that would like to speak against the project? Seeing none, then the applicant has a chance for a response. They need to, or want to.
My name is Terry Lee. I am the owner of the property in question. When we first contracted Blue Water Pool, we proposed this back in April of last year. He told us he would get all the permits and everything would be fine. We had no idea that there was a setback of 10 feet. The Inghams isn't, and the people south of the Inghams isn't. So it was nothing that we even thought about. We had a screen enclosure. It's exactly where our new one would start. And the pool was lined up from that because we put pavers around the pool and the pavers covered the concrete that was the existing pool or existing porch. So we had no idea there was any question as to, not being able to do this. I have skin cancer. I've had already 8 taken off my face. My dermatologist, of course, thinks I'm crazy living in Florida, but I protect myself with hats and sunscreen when I go out. But to sit in my backyard, I'm sitting there in full sun, and the overhang would help me tremendously to sit out there and enjoy my pool. So I guess, we're asking that this be approved.
Okay, thank you. Any discussion between the board members?
I have a question for Stuart.
Stuart, yeah.
Stuart, if this is denied, they can still overhang, they just can't get within 10 feet of the property line, correct? They can do a solid roof like they're talking about.
They could do a solid roof to the back, but it would still have to meet the 10-foot setback requirement. However, based on the design of the pool, I'm not sure whether or not that's feasible. I don't have the pool plans in front of me. I mean, I can't really speak to that.
Well, if they
But
just-
theoretically, they could.
If they just go to the edge of the south part of the pool, they'll be within the 10 feet of the setback.
If it's cantilevered, I believe it could be done, but I'm not sure structurally whether or not that's something that could be done. In theory, you know, anything can be done, but I just don't know the specifics of the application and the way the house is and the way the pool is to say whether or not that could be feasibly done.
Okay, thank you.
Any other discussion?
Yeah, I think there is. I think we should talk a little bit more about it. If they filed all the paperwork way in advance the way they were supposed to, do you think that this, I know you can't say, would this have been approved with the variance? But because they didn't file the paperwork properly,
So
it's a big,
you just heard the applicant mention that, and it's typical that one contractor would take care of all the paperwork. I mean, Fred is the building official and community service director. He could probably speak a little bit more, categorically than I can. But in my experience, the primary contractor would take care of all the applications. But in this, and that apparently was the arrangement, but he failed to do that, the pool contractor that is. And that's probably what caused the issue.
Pretty simple.
Stuart, your staff denial is based on the fact that they haven't got those 3 extra pieces that don't conform to your requirements, correct?
Correct. Based on, and the city attorney can speak a little bit more on this, but based on the advice that has been given by the current legal counsel that we have and previous legal counsel, and essentially all of those criteria have to be met in order for staff to be able to say that, recommend that a variance application be granted. I mean,
Okay, so
if there's just one, it doesn't matter which one it is, that's essentially what staff is bounded by.
So in essence, what you're telling us is we have no choice.
What I'm saying is that in staff's opinion and based on the evidence that's provided to staff, that is a recommendation.
Okay, thank you.
On a follow-up on that, if they would have met all 5 criteria, it wouldn't be presented to us. Because
If all 7 criteria were met, correct, we wouldn't be here.
So the reason it's presented to us is because they did not meet 3.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. The reason why we're here today, I'm sorry, I apologize. The reason why we're here today is because an application was made because a permit was denied for a screen enclosure. And the reason why staff is recommending denial is because all 7 criteria have not been met. So even if all 7 criteria were met, because the permit was denied, because the setback was not made, and an application was made, I mean, that's the reason why we're essentially here.
The criteria, and I want to clarify something, the criteria having been met or not is Stuart's opinion. You, the board, make that decision though. So if Stuart, if in your opinion Stuart misinterpreted the code or was wrong about his assumptions or whatever the case, and you could articulate on the record as to why all 7 of the criteria have been met, you're not bound to his opinion. That's for the board to decide.
And one last question. So if we approve this setback for future houses that want to do the same thing, they would have to come over here and do the same process. It's not like if we approve this one, it automatically, all the rest gets approved, correct?
Correct. The city attorney can follow up on this, but essentially a variance does not set a precedent. Every case that comes for a variance before the board is judged on its own merit, and there's no precedent that's established.
But if we denied this based on the three criteria, they could possibly correct the three criteria and come back to us again, correct?
I don't know that they can correct the three criteria because, again, this is my opinion. The board may feel that all those criteria are met. I'm just saying in staff's opinion, we don't believe it's met. That's our opinion. However, if the board were to deny the application because they agreed with staff, I don't know that they can come back in the future and say, okay, well, now we've met the criteria. I mean, that's a question for the city attorney, I believe.
Yeah, I mean, the first three criteria are essentially, you know, the character and nature of the property, and that's not gonna change just because they come back in a year.
Okay.
Redesign it. Self-imposed problem.
Any other comments by the board? Discussion? Any board member wish to make a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve the zoning variance, ZB 12021-002 as presented.
So I would ask if you're going to motion to approve, that you would just put some reasons on the record why you believe the first three criteria are met. That'll help us out if we ever need to defend, you know, the decision either appeal.
You're approving the denial,
Yeah.
right?
No.
No?
He's approving it.
Yeah.
So there are 7 or 6 criteria.
I'm not gonna second that.
Regardless, the first 3, in Stuart's opinion, weren't met. So we don't have the facts on the record to support that, so you need to provide them as part of your motion and discussion. So I would encourage you to look at the first 3 criteria and just articulate a reason why you believe those are met, those criteria are met.
Because the previous structure was set, and I believe that the 5.7 setback was grandfathered in.
Well, technically it is. Because they can't make them tear the house down, just because they come out with a new code. But to add on to the house is a different story than,
But it's a structure, not a permanent structure, it's a screen, that's the way I look.
Construction.
that's why I asked about the pool. Is it a structure?
Mr. Chairman, maybe I could just, I mean, if you start with the first one, the special condition or circumstance that's unique to the property. So the reason, do we have their application for this?
Yeah.
The applicant said that, and we have said staff analysis, but not the application.
Someone asked if the criteria could be on the,
The applicant asked if they could have the criteria on the screen, is that possible?
Mm-hmm.
If you could,
I can find it.
It's on the packet.
Yeah.
Oh,
It's, I can't find it,
Oh,
but
okay.
I think he had. Stuart.
They can change.
So their application says the existing home is 5 feet 7 from the property line, and it's grandfathered in to meet the code now, and setback. So, but as Stuart spoke about it, new construction would have to meet the current code, but so you would have to, if you had a reason why you think maybe, it is a unique condition that, these houses were older, or, what have you, but you could go through each one of those 3 and if you have a reason, then. I can certainly think of some reasons in the second one, where it's not primarily, I think we've heard testimony today that there's some existing reasons why they need the structure built that's not financial. So, I think at least that criteria just jumps off the page at me, but that'd be up to the board, obviously.
Okay. Couldn't find it just a minute ago, sorry.
It's 8, subsection 8, there you go.
So, you all see this? I've highlighted actually the first three. Criteria.
Stewart already provided criteria when final 4 are met, so for your, for putting it on the record, it would be helpful if you address each of the 3 first criteria so that we can have evidence on the record that supports the approval.
Does each member have to address that, John?
Now, as long as somebody
In the
on
motion.
the board addresses it and provides criteria, all the other members can consider and either accept or reject that member's criteria. Just need something on the record in support.
So far as criteria number B, the exception to that is that she has a note that Mrs. Lee has health conditions that deem it necessary to have the screen. Is that what you're indicating?
Yeah, if you think that's a valid reason to accept the conditions, then yes. And now that you've said it on the record, that you have evidence in support of it, that helps us, like I said, in case it gets appealed. But we prefer to have all 3 criteria addressed as well. So 1 and 3 as well.
Well, it's in your motion, so it's voting either against your motion. So if you want to explain A and C.
Number 1 was, like the application indicated, the existing home is 5.7 from the property line grandfathered into the code. So that's my motion. And number 2 was the paperwork and the cancer, that she has a proper paperwork to indicate her condition. Number 3, as the applicant noted, once again, the indication of her cancer condition. So that's my motion in order to approve and in order to answer the 3 missed criteria.
Can we add anything to that, John, before the vote or not?
No, if anybody else has any additional facts that they would like to put on the record, you can do so before voting. If any other board members have thought of additional things that might come into play.
One of mine is that it talks about, buildings in the same zoning class and properties in the same class. And when you go through that neighborhood, I mean, let's face it, nothing from 1950s conforms to anything. And some people do have pool enclosures. I didn't get out and measure to see if they're 10 feet from their lot lines. But if we're going to talk about commonly enjoyed by other properties, then I think we're asking basically to go from 5'7" down to 5 foot. So you're asking for 7 inches on this variance in order that they can commonly enjoy the same amenities as other properties in the zoning class. So that's my 2 cents worth.
You're making a motion, a second?
Well, I motioned as chair.
Oh, okay. So
I
somebody
have a
has
motion,
to
but
make,
I don't have a second yet.
pardon me?
If anyone wants to second Rick's motion?
Can the chair second? Usually they don't.
It's not typical. I don't think there are anything in the rules that prevent it, but typically the chair wouldn't provide a motion or a second. If there's not another member willing to second the motion, that kind of indicates that that's probably not going to pass anyways.
Can I speak again?
Who wants to
Not
speak
with a
again?
motion on the floor.
Yeah, I mean, if the motion's withdrawn and you wanted to consider additional public testimony, that's the chair's discretion. But you've already had a public hearing and it's no longer required.
So let me withdraw my motion, so additional speaking to be.
Wait, don't withdraw yet, I'm thinking.
Oh,
Sorry, I just need a moment.
My grandson says that. I need a moment.
I'll make a second that we approve his motion.
Okay.
Sherry, would you take roll?
Ready for roll? Sure. Mr. Delage?
yes.
Ms. Tornatori?
Yes.
Mr. Horian?
Yes.
Mr. Lilly?
No.
Mr. Schmitz?
Yes.
Motion passes 4-1.
Board have any other comments or discussion items today?
Did you get your COVID shot?
That falls under HIPAA. Meeting's adjourned.
I'm still too young.
Chair, are we done?
I'm still too young. I'm 2 years. I'm retired.
Are you gonna be able to get the notarization today, Harry?
Oh, no,
As soon as I
thank
go
you.
back to my
Thank
office,
you.
I'll.
I hope everything.
I guess we're.